Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Crafty Chat, and this is episode number 24. And it's early November for us right now, so this airs in a couple of weeks. Um, Weather's been really nice for us. We've had an Indian summer, which is awesome and really alleviated a lot of stress. So I don't know, somehow the warmer weather just makes things easier. All right, so nothing heavy today, but we want to talk about recent rabbit holes. And what does that even mean, right? So, Lucy, you want to talk about what a rabbit hole is?
Sure. Well, I think that it is just, I think it's something that, that it's been used more since it's an association with the internet, basically, because you start to search for something or something pops in your mind, and then you can link to something else, and you just keep going down a rabbit hole of information or, depending on what you're looking for. But it just can take you pretty deep into, information about whatever the subject that you're looking for is. And it can also be, it can be the type of thing where you just set out to find out one bit of something, and then you look up like 2 hours later and you're still in the midst of doing this. But when we were talking about rabbit holes, I was trying to think about recent rabbit holes that I'd gone down, and that got me thinking actually about like, what did a rabbit hole look like pre-internet? Um, and it's not that it wasn't there. Like, I think I still had that same drive to seek out the information. You just had to work a little bit harder for it. But it could be going to the library and getting a stack of books about one thing, or that's the trick about it earlier, was that you had to find a way to even get down that hole. So
Yeah. Well, and like you were saying, you don't do it purposefully. It's something that just you kind of literally or whatever, figuratively, not literally,
yeah,
figuratively fall into, because you just
right.
get drawn into like this and this, and especially looking at library books, like you mentioned cooking books before we started recording, and it's just like, and that's, yeah, you're like browsing on that shelf for the thing you need, and then you see these other things that start to pop out and
Right.
draw you away.
That's why I love the BISAC system so much, that we're moving a lot of the branches towards, is that my experience with libraries started out very young as purely research, and it was kind of like the mid 90s equivalent of a rabbit hole. So that was like my only way of gathering information, was to go to the library and just go to a specific section, pull a bunch of books off. Usually it was like animals or space or nature. So I'd just go and yank a bunch of books off the shelf and just read those, and kind of get lost in that book-based rabbit hole a lot. And I did the same thing in college with religion and sociology and anthropology books, because it was closely tied to my major. But most of my adult life has been like, my research stuff, or the things that I fall into, has all been internet based. So I think of the summer game badges as kind of like a guided rabbit hole, where it like takes you down a specific tangent of information or of knowledge, and that's, you learn more while you're doing it, which is what I love about rabbit holes, is because I'm picking up stuff as I go. A lot of the rabbit holes that I fall down are making things, looking for patterns, looking for ideas for a project, or gathering those resources to be able to use later, which is why Pinterest is my preferred rabbit hole. I also blame Wikipedia for a lot of my rabbit holes. So that's,
sure,
that's,
yeah.
Well, they make
the links.
linking so easily.
But I wanted to like stick with one thing about books too, because it's like, browsing on the shelf, which obviously we can't do right now at the moment. But like even browsing online, I'll find you're typing in like part of a title, or something, and just like all the things that are related that come up. Or like I remember looking for the movie Yarn and typing in that title, and then there was like a book called Yarn, and then there's just like, if you search Yarn, it's like you find all these different things, and it was just fiction, and it was just how that can really take you down the hole. So it's like browsing online, it can be tricky, but I think you have to be open to that rabbit hole experience too. Just like you're kind of looking for something, and you're going to maybe find something completely different.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because that actually brought a thought up in my mind before, when we were talking before about the different information that I go to books versus the internet for. So like Lucy, you're saying cookbooks. I don't look for recipes online. I know you mentioned that too, of I go to books to look for recipes because I find it easier to understand and easier to find what I'm looking for. But for like crafting stuff, I'll go to the internet, unless I'm on a particular jag of like, I want to check out all of the books on sashiko or crochet or embroidery from the library, look at all of them all at once, which I unfortunately have done, and had 20 books come in at once at the library and been just like, oh, what have I done? And then just going through all of them and then returning what I don't need, or taking,
I still do that. That's sort of my, when I was thinking about this conversation we were going to have today, I realized that I think still my preferred method of any sort of rabbit hole is actually to go get that stack of books. There's just something about it. And I was trying to think too, like, why is this, what is it about, even like an internet rabbit hole or any kind of rabbit hole, like what is it that gaining of information kind of, like, why does that excite your brain? And I think it's because there's something about making connections between like something that you already know and something you're learning, or something you didn't connect on your own and it's connected. Like there's just, it's just, I don't know, it kind of gives your thinking purpose a little bit. So it's, I think that that's kind of what that drive to keep pulling you down that hole. That's, you know,
yeah.
I don't know where that comes from.
I also find it kind of cool to track my associations. So like with books, it's more, I feel like it's a more curated experience by the author of like, this is the direction that I want to take you in throughout this book. Whereas with like the internet, or even if I'm browsing like a stack of books, I jump around, and my associations are kind of obtuse in a way, in some points of like, why did I jump from, and I did this recently, why did I jump from kolaches, which is a type of pastry, to like sausage making in Germany? Like, how did that, you know, how did I make that jump of just this weird Wikipedia hole that I went down? Because I find it funny, like what catches my eye and what catches my interest. So I enjoy tracking those things in my head of like, what the hell was, and there's a lot of moments where I'm like, I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
You need like a little mind map afterwards.
Yes. Yeah.
I wish I did that, because my thing is I found a lot of bookmarks that I have like in different folders that are somehow categorized, or sometimes it's like we'll get to later this week and it's been like 2 years, but it's just like, what is this random bookmark? It's obviously something I was looking for something else. I'm like, I'm gonna look at this later, you know, and I like bookmarked it. It's just like this. So yeah, I have a couple of those.
I use an extension on Chrome called OneTab, and it condenses all your tabs down into one list. Because I have a tendency, because again, I jump around a lot, I have a tendency to have 10 or 15 and up tabs open in my browser at any given point. And there's some times where I do have to shut off my computer and go somewhere. And so that helps me kind of keep track. I was cleaning that folder this morning and it was weird. Like, the different days of jumping around of like, you know, this day was sewing patterns, this day was travel, this day was, it's just all over the place. So reminded me I need to go back through my bookmarks and actually delete a bunch of my bookmarks, because I'm moving to a new desktop computer. So
and then you do that and you can't remember how you're like, there was that thing, and I know I was looking at this stuff that one day and I found that other thing, and like you never find it again.
I found one of those.
Pocket, like Chrome, and but I'm not organized about it at all. I used to tag stuff on there, but now I don't anymore. And so I spend as much time searching through what I've saved in my pocket. And it goes back, I'm really bad about cleaning it out too. So it's like, that's its own rabbit hole, you know, you go back and you're like, whoa, oh yeah, I was interested in that like 3 years ago.
It's almost like a time capsule in a way.
Yeah. But I find that like, as far as finding that thing quickly that I know I saved, it doesn't help me at all, because I just keep adding to it. So.
Well, it also, with Google allowing you to import your bookmarks from like an older version of Chrome, like when I got a new computer 4 years ago, I imported all my bookmarks from my old computer. So I have these folders that are fully a decade old. And I have not gone through them at all. And I'm almost a little scared to open it. And I just keep looking at that of like, I should probably like clean that out. don't want to. It's like getting into your attic of your browser window. But I did actually find something that I saved that I had a thought about like 2 months ago, and wanted to cast on socks. And I found this tool at one point that was supposed to help count your gusset decreases when you move from the heel flap to the foot section of your socks. And it was like a string that had 60 little metal rings on it. And you put a metal ring on each side, every place that you do a decrease. So when you get to that point, you remember to decrease and you don't forget. And I could not for the life of me remember what it was called. And it was driving me crazy. And I tried everything, every permutation of whatever the hell it was, and couldn't find it, and just gave up of like, okay, well, maybe the website deleted it, or maybe it's not being sold anymore. And I found it this morning when I was cleaning up my one tab, and I was so excited. I was like, I'm buying that right now. So I got really excited when I actually found something, but that doesn't happen very often for me.
But yeah, I agree with you. Like a lot of my rabbit hole situations lately are making based, right? Mm-hmm. Either I'm looking at a blog about something else and they have a link to, just things pop up. I don't even know where they come from, but I totally agree with you. And Instagram has been that for me a lot too.
Yeah.
And I think the recent one, like looking at the drop cloth samplers, I'm going to speak a little slower.
That's kind of a mouthful though.
It is. Well, I heard
a little bit, yeah.
Something about Midwesterners, apparently we speak really quickly and I never noticed it, but sometimes when I'm talking, I'm like, that's probably why I can't speak clearly, is because I'm going too fast. So hashtag drop cloth samplers on Instagram, like, was really fast. It just like, it opened up lots of different things. And I think that's where I got into pin loom weaving. So it's like a square loom that has little pins around the side, or like nails, and it's a manner of weaving these little squares very quickly. And then I don't know, just looked really cool and fascinating. I was ready to go buy one, and I was like, okay, hold up. You just bought a knitting project. Let's finish that first. But I did request a couple books from the library, and I'm looking up tutorials because I'm like, I just couldn't I'm like, how does this thing work? Like, how does it make this fabric? So it's very exciting. I can't wait for another month or so. I'm like trying to get through that shawl so fast because I want to get to this pin loom weaving now. So
yeah, that's I remember seeing those more at like historical reenactment days at the Ella Sharp Museum in Jackson County has a living museum portion where they have like a log cabin house, and they have a couple weaving looms. They have a blacksmith, a smithy, and a printing press, and a couple other things. And that was one of the they do a sheep shearing festival every spring, and they have a bunch of weavers from the local guild come in, and there was one lady working on a pin loom, and I was like, well, that's really cool. At the time I was more interested in the tabletop looms because that was what I was doing, but it was still sticks out in my memory really strongly of the pin loom. So
well, I'm fascinated by like the garments and things that I've seen that people make from all these little squares, and they just have it's a much different obviously than doing crochet squares, or knitting might be closer to it just because the way the drape of the material, I think, just because it's it's a slimmer, thinner kind of weight. So
it's a lighter thread. It's a lighter thread, so it's kind of different. Yeah, no, that's true, depending on what you use. But I've always been really impressed with like large size floor looms and the kind of really gorgeous shawls and blankets that you can create, and like the really, really pretty color combinations. You don't see it very often with hand dyed yarns like on knitting and crochet websites like Ravelry, even though Ravelry is also geared towards weavers. There's a lot smaller of a contingent of weavers that regularly use that. And a lot of the weavings that I've seen have been more neutral colors and stuff, but every once in a while I'll stumble across somebody who has bought the same hand-dyed yarn that I have, like this one, where it's really, really bright, vivid colors, and they weave with it instead of knitting or crochet. And it's just absolutely mind-blowing. Like the color combinations that they get, and just how pretty it is, and the effect that the yarn has when it's woven rather than when it's knitted or crocheted is really cool.
Yeah.
But I also go nuts for bright colors, so that's my thing. But yeah. We were talking a little bit about like, Lucy, you're mentioning, so have you ever had an experience where you've been looking for a book, but you couldn't find it on the internet, or like pre-internet looking for things? We were talking about like calling bookstores and.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even remember, you know, like what you would do before you could just look on the internet and try to find things. I mean, I remember like when I was living in New York, like actually just going to the New York Public Library and asking and doing it that way, old school. But I think I know personally, like once the internet came around, you kind of have this expectation that like the information should be there. And it's very disappointing when you type something in, like you're saying, Nancy, trying to find that thing and there's nothing about it. You're like, how can that be? How is this not infinite? You know, it's just amazing to me how quickly, being someone who lived in a pre-internet age and then had the internet, like how quickly your expectations change for what information should be available to you.
Yeah. There's been very few situations where I'm like, Google has failed me miserably, but it has happened. And like I work a lot with the library, finding interlibrary loan items for folks. And that's, thankfully, we have like a 95% finder rate of, you know, we can find almost anything around, you know, even in the US and Canada. We don't do ILL around the world, but every once in a while there's something they can't find. Of like, God, I would think that it would be somewhere, somehow, in some format available, but there are some things that just get lost to time, and that's
if they weren't reprinted or somehow somebody just doesn't have it in their collection, or But I remember even trying to find books that I wanted to buy. I mean, I have some that I can think back to my early days of pottery, which would have been, you know, 20 some years ago. And the internet was a bit more basic then, but still being able to dial it up and find like a website for used books. And then it suggests all these different sellers where you could find something, which is basically what Amazon has taken over now. But there used to be different places. You know, and there's, that I guess, you know, booksellers were a lot more prominent, you know, and like, you probably would just go to your bookseller and say, hey, I'm trying to find this rare item, you know, or seemingly rare. And then they would have a network of people that they could contact and find things. But with anything, you know, camera equipment too. I remember that, seeking things out. You had to go to camera shows sometimes.
Yeah. Or even honestly, a camera shop, you know, that.
Good times.
So what have been some things, rabbit holes that you've gone down recently?
This actually just happened yesterday. I was reading the New York Times book review, and there was a reviewer in there I really enjoy, and he has a book coming out that is like just a book of quotes, and he has collected quotes his whole life, which reminded me of the quote book that I had showed earlier on this. But he was talking about a commonplace book, and he's like, this is a commonplace book. And I was like, oh, it has a name, it's a thing. And so then I started to go on the internet and look all about commonplace books, and they go back to like, I mean, you know, like Pillow Book it would be a commonplace book, or in the 1700s or 1800s, like actually books of recipes. So then, you know, because like you'll look up commonplace books and you find like, well, Emerson or Thoreau, or, you know, they would collect. So it's any book that is a collection, not of your own original thoughts, but of like quotes, other people's thoughts. Or it could be recipes, it could be medicinal information, it could be, you know, like patterns of things. So it made me think about like what was the role of the commonplace book in women's lives, right? Like how history is shown through. For women, I think going back, it's a lot of crafting and cooking, and that's how you can learn about women's history, basically.
Yeah.
It was really interesting to start looking on the internet, because on one hand, I'm looking at like the Schlesinger Library, you know, at Harvard, and like really old stuff. And then the same search is also leading me to Pinterest, because people are still doing this today. So it was just really interesting to think about all the different ways that actually is something that we probably all have. Like, even if you have a collection of someone else's recipes or your own recipes, or that book my book of quotes, it's actually a thing and it has a name. But it did also motivate me as someone who collects quotes still all the time, but I'm always writing them on like a Post-it. or an index card or a million different notebooks. I was like, I need to start collecting them again in the same place. But it was just interesting. And it happened yesterday when I was thinking, I can't just make myself go down a rabbit hole. And then later in the day, off I went. So that was recent for me.
That's I had that thought while you're talking of like bullet journals could definitely be considered commonplace books. And there's a program on Creative Bug that talks about silverarums, and she's like, this is a commonplace book. And it was something that I didn't even think about at the time,
right.
But went on like a rabbit hole of silverarums and was looking at those. And that was really cool to see, because I was like, I just, you know, and I thought at the time of watching that video of like, do you guys remember Smash Journals?
Yeah.
Company. Yeah. That, like that kind of concept of, sorry, I've got like a hair in my face.
Okay.
Like that concept. I mean, Smash books are kind of out of style now, but it was like a loose form of scrapbooking.
Right.
For folks that weren't familiar with those. And it was just like slam everything and, you know, a single book, and you don't have to organize it all, just kind of stream of consciousness. So I love that is a thing perpetually throughout creating and documenting culture kind of within what you're doing. But and it's kind of, shoot, I forgot where I was going with that, but I was going to talk about one of the rabbit holes that I went down was I'm starting to get back into spiritual type things. It's something that I haven't really worked with since I was in college, and it's almost 10 years ago, but started pulling out all my old New Age books and a lot of my tools and stuff, and was weeding through things that I didn't want. And one of the things that I pulled out was a kind of like a Book of Shadows, grimoire type loosely based thing, where it's a gathering place of information, correspondence charts, astrology, divination methods, things like that, and was looking through it and realizing how many holes and things were missing in that book. I was like, well, that would be something, you know, starting from most basic and learning as I go. I'm going to revisit all of this. I'm going to relearn everything, and I'll actually put things in as I learn them. So like I put in my astrology chart and information about the houses, and then I did a palmistry page. So it was really cool to go through the resources that I had and kind of put everything into its own commonplace book to do. And I really, really enjoyed that. And it's giving me a chance to use the watercolor stuff that we've done already and some of the drawing things to be a little bit more artistic about putting information into a book. So I'm really happy with how that's turning out. And it's just kind of been a fun exercise, something to not really take seriously, because I took it super seriously in college, and it doesn't need to be that serious for me. So that's been really fun.
Yeah. Well, I think it's making those connections. I mean, I think that's like what a commonplace book in general is, sort of like an information management device that's just, but I think it's the same as like what brings you down a rabbit hole. It's just connecting information that, you know, there's something about that kind of can be exciting. So
yeah, I think so. How about you, Heidi? Have you gone down any rabbit holes?
I feel like kind of scattered. I mean, they've been project related, and I made some minor notes, and I'm like, yeah, I don't remember how any of that stuff was connected, honestly. Typical me, I guess. But there was one thing that I found recently, was this website called Spirit Cloth, and it's something I had bookmarked a long time ago. So it was kind of going back to when I was talking about, you know, discovering this random bookmark. And but I also kind of rediscovered it because of doing just stitching, and I'm looking at a project using like scraps of cloth and that kind of thing. And anyway, that's what a lot of her work is. And she's still on Instagram. I mean, I still see her stuff here and there, but it was just like, I kind of took a deep dive, I guess, the other day, because one thing was like really, really old page from a couple of years ago or something like that of a project she did. And then it's just like finding her tutorials for how she attaches pieces of fabric together was just like really cool. And then I'm thinking about doing natural dyeing or coffee or tea dyeing with some of these materials, and just kind of like it just becomes like me like thinking about conceiving this whole project that I'm probably not actually going to do. I think the project is just the conception. So I guess it's my conceptual art piece. It's just like the motions and the planning and the idea. And I'm like, I don't know if I'll actually get to it because I feel like it's a project that I've thought about before. So that was like I don't know. So that was kind of a deep dive with her and her website. And it was just like, it was so wild too to watch a tutorial and be like, because it's like, it's just a blog. It's like, you don't really have a sense of who this person is or what their voice sounds like. So it's just kind of strange to like put like a physical person to it.
Yeah.
Like I remember meeting somebody once that I had read their blog for years and years and years, and I met them and it was just like so disorienting because I'm like, you're not that I had really pictured the person, but I guess maybe I had. So it's just kind of like jarring, but yeah. And then I think also somewhere in there with the spirit cloth, with that whole conceptual piece I started getting into, somehow it got suggested to me about pine needle basket weaving. And so I've been watching a lot of tutorials on YouTube about how to do that. And then it was funny, we were taking a walk over the weekend and we were in a pine forest, and it didn't occur to me until at the end of the walk, I was like, oh, I should have collected some pine needles. But that's okay. I was like, it was kind of nice that I was like, I actually liked the walk. I was like away from everything and I wasn't,
it's hard to find those places in Ann Arbor where you can't hear any car traffic. I've been looking for good spots for years, but I've been having a hard time with that. But
I was lucky that's up north, so
I think so. Yeah. No, I got the Gerald Eddy Discovery Center in Chelsea was the closest that I could get to having absolutely no car traffic. And that was really great. But no, my projects are kind of the same way of it. I wish there was a way that, like, documenting, I'm really into documenting things, and I do a good job documenting a lot of things, but I almost wish there was a way that I could document my internal ideas. So like those conceptual projects that you're talking about, of like, I have this idea swirling around in my head, and my Pinterest board is almost like the fossil of that. It's like the imprint or the memory of the things that went into that idea that never quite manifested. So like, I'll be going back through my pins from a certain period of time of like, I can remember some things that I was conceptualizing, but most of the things I can't. So that's kind of frustrating with the way that I gather information if I don't and why I document things really well, because oftentimes I can't make the same associations in a nebulous time in the future. So like looking back on things is hard for me to make those associations again of like, this is where I was going with these 10 pins of like, this is the final product that I wanted to make. So,
and I think some of my journey also began with working on a project for another program. And I decided to crochet with wire. And it was like, it seemed so natural to me, but I'm like, I remember this idea came to me years and years ago. Like I saw something, I swear it was in Beadwork magazine, and it was actually beads, but it wasn't just a peyote stitch, because they did use wire. So maybe they did peyote stitch with wire. I don't even remember now, but it was like this formed piece that looked just like a vase, and it was just gorgeous, but it was like with beads. And I'm like trying to find things about crocheting wire, and all I can find are like making these little baskets, which is not really what I want to do. So and I could make it up as I go. It's not like I needed to have like a pattern or anything, but it's just like I wanted to find that thing that had sparked this idea. Who knows? And I'm like, I swear I used to own the magazine, don't have that one anymore. Like
I know that I've seen crochet with wire jewelry.
Well, yeah. And think, isn't chainmail, isn't that kind of similar? So maybe this isn't such a wild idea really, but I want to make sculpture with it. So
yeah. Oh God, chainmail. That for some reason reminds me of pop tab chainmail and how popular that was when I was in high school. Don't know why, but I watched a guy make an entire breastplate of just Mountain Dew pop tabs.
Yeah.
No idea why, but it was cool when he finished it. I thought he was.
People made skirts and stuff. Like, it was like a fashion thing, sort of.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Safety pins too. I remember when safety pins were like a necessary part of clothing. I remember being jealous of my cousin because she had a shirt that was completely held together on the sides by like 150 safety pins, and I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. Now I'm like, oh, that would be a nightmare. I can't wash that. Can't put that in the washer.
No, because they're gonna rust. But then that will gain an element to it, though, as the rust feeds into the fabric.
A nice patina. Yeah.
Patina. God, that's a word I haven't thought of in a while, and it's a word that I've been Meaning I've been using it, but not using it. So patina, love that term. Yeah.
It's a good term.
Yeah.
Yeah. The patina of the fabric.
Exactly.
To create.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's why wax canvas bags are so popular in the knitting community. So they develop that.
Yeah.
Those creases and that. Yeah. Because I mean, my wax canvas bag, it's not creasing yet, but it's I don't like crinkle up my bags. I don't know how you guys get that to do that. I don't crinkle these up. This is not something that I do. So
and it's funny because like that's an example. There are a lot of things that are better with age, like you own, and they're not as nice when they're new.
It's like when you were a kid and you got like a new pair of jeans and you had to like stomp on them and like, rub them in the dirt or whatever, just to make them look worn. Can't wear new jeans.
Yep.
Cowboy boots.
That's a thing for comfort with me. I hate new jeans. It's the stiffness
at all. Like my husband always jokes, you need to like get someone to wear your clothes for you, and then you can wear them. Like
that's the beauty of thrift store shopping.
Oh yeah, I mean I know that's my thing. It's all about comfort.
I know. I hate jeans at this point. I don't wear them anymore. So I try.
No, I'm gonna start wearing them
outside, and it was like 70 degrees outside, and without the leaves, there's no shade. It's a different 70 degree than when it's in the summer. And I was like, I am so hot and so uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just not it's not expected, and it's confusing to your brain when it's this hot outside, but then it gets dark at like 5:30, and it's just I don't know.
Yeah, because even when I went to San Diego one time around this time of year, it was not as warm as it is like with the heat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny too, is it's hot in the sun, but then you can step into the shade and it's not the same because we don't have the same humidity. Again, I guess without the leaves, without the trees being all leafed out and the plants and everything.
Yeah.
See, I love that. I love that warm in the sun, cool in the shade.
Oh yeah, that's
and I usually get that most of the time in the fall, but like I've been absolutely enamored with the weather for the last week. I'm outside every second that I can get just because it got so cold so fast, and I was just really, really disoriented by how cold it got. So I was almost like needed that warm spell to reset my seasonal clock or something. But it'll be in the 40s again on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. So it's, it's coming, but it snowed last weekend and I was not ready for that. It's like, I know this isn't the earliest that it's ever snowed in Michigan, but
we were up a couple hours away up north and like there was remnants of snow. Like they got snow, even more north, there was more snow. But yeah, it's funny. It was like, yeah, it's 70 degrees and there's all those patches of snow, but it's kind of like how that is in spring, I guess. But
yeah,
but we haven't had Indian summer for a couple of years.
No, not like this.
Nice.
I know it's nice actually. Like what I struggle with in the winters here is the color of the sky, the gray.
Yeah,
and it's unique. Like I grew up in New England, but it was not. I was not like that. The grayness that you see out the windows here all winter long, like doesn't matter the temperature. So right now I'm just trying to like enjoy the way the light looks.
Yeah,
that's gray.
I enjoy that. It's weird for me because like I enjoy gray skies in a short period of time. So like 2 or 3 days of gray skies I'm totally okay with, because I love overcast weather. To me makes color pop more. So especially like in the fall or in the spring, it just makes everything pop. But then those like really long stretches in the winter of gray skies, no sunshine, no like dirty snow, just absolutely, I don't want to do anything. Just major seasonal affected.
Here, I don't know. I mean, really, like I know that sounds weird, but I lived in Boston, I lived in New York, I lived in St. Louis. It gets gray everywhere, but here it's like gray.
Much more oppressive. Must be from all the lakes.
It's like a Michigan gray. Yeah, I don't know.
Michigan gray. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a knit the sky project 2 years ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. We had talked about it like at one of our knitting nights, and anyway, there's a book, and I did the knit the sky, but it was winter, and so in order to do anything like of substance, I had to walk in the morning when it was still dark, which wasn't that hard because it stays dark.
Yeah.
So that I could see, I had to time it so I could see when it changed from dark to light, because that was the only time that I could get any variation of color. And then you actually get like some pinks and purples and stuff. It was kind of cool. But like trying to do that in the winter in Michigan, I was like, maybe I'll just knit a gray scarf, or I'll go walking.
Or find 4 or 5 different shades of gray and try to do.
So I wanted so it was a little like there's some sunrise in there, but no, it was cool. I really enjoyed it, and it actually was very much like it got me out there to walk every morning, because I was like, oh, I got to see what color, because it's like then you're doing it the same time every day, the same piece of sky, and then adding a couple rows to your scarf. So
I love that book. It's Knit the Sky, Cultivate Your Creativity with a Playful Way of Knitting by Leah Redmond.
Yeah,
and that book is so cool. It talks about like knitting a mood scarf with different colors for your mood for like 30 days. Or the one that really struck me was like knitting the number of heartbeats for your favorite animal or your pet. So like knitting, so like everybody's heartbeat is a different speed,
right?
And there's a certain number of milliseconds between each beat. So like she did one of a hummingbird, and there's like 4 milliseconds between each hummingbird's heartbeat. So she would do 4 rows of green and then a row of red, and then 4 rows of green and then a row of red. And that was just so cool, because she did swatches of like all different types of animals to show what the pattern would look like. And talked about doing them as like memorial scarves for a pet that has passed, or I don't know, her ideas were really, really fun, and it really was a playful way of knitting. And I was looking at it like, I could do this with sewing, I could do it with crochet, I could do it with just about anything. So her ideas were just really
it appeals
cool.
to like, it resets your creativity no matter what you're doing, but then it also makes you look at, like in this case, knitting very differently. She did like a cityscape, like you look out your window. But actually what you were just talking about with the heartbeats was reminding me of another small rabbit hole that I did recently go on, where I was helping someone figure out a code for something, like a poem that had a code in it. And that got me thinking about different ways people have used codes or sent messages to each other in history. And then I was thinking about crafting. And so then I started to look into like knitting, that there used to be women who would knit information and codes during like the world wars into scarves, and I just, which I already knew, but it was cool to be reminded of it. Because then I thought, like, what if you could find one of those patterns? Like, what if you knit this scarf that was actually like this knit stitch was here and this purl stitch was here, and that was actually, I don't know. So
and I've seen Morse code jewelry. There was a seller at the Carytown Book Fest, and then I think at the Winter Market last year, that was selling Morse code jewelry. So like these big long necklaces that just look like a string of beads, but if you paid attention, it was actual Morse code.
That's so cool.
I was like, that's really ingenious, and I thought that was really nifty.
Yeah. Wow. Speaking of fairs, then.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that's a good segue.
We're just making good connections on our rabbit hole episode, aren't we?
We are, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no jumping from A to B on this one for me.
No. No,
like jumping over.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I just wanted to give a mention, or so people might be aware if you're not aware, because a lot of the typical art fairs, craft fairs are not going to be happening this year due to the pandemic. You can't really be in person. So they have gone online, and for us, Tiny Expo was always a really fun day at the library. It was a one-day fair. We had usually about 40 to 45 vendors, I would say, that would set up. The library never smelled so good. With all the people with the candles and the soaps and everything. It was always like, that's just something that sticks out in my mind. But yeah, so sadly not having that this year, but you can go onto the website, the Ann Arbor District Library website, and there's a page for Tiny Expo featuring the vendors that we've had in the past and links to their online shops. So you can still go and explore and shop and kind of like, and I kind of did that the other day too, because I was like, it was whatever day it was, and kind of looking through different vendors, and like I did do some shopping, so it was kind of fun to like Like, I'm spending time on the weekend kind of going to the craft fair, but not, you know. And the other one that's really cool is the Detroit Urban Craft Fair. They're on Instagram. They have, each vendor I think has a week or a couple days where they are like
they have part of a day.
Yeah, so that's really fun too. So thank goodness we have such a easy virtual world, and you know,
right.
you can really get a sense of projects anymore. Like, people are really good at their photography and everything these days too, so because it's become such a platform that's used. Buy with confidence. But, I don't know, did you guys have anything to share about those two fairs or other fairs maybe?
We were looking at the list before we started, and the one that jumped out immediately to me was there's a vendor at last Tiny Expo that was selling polymer clay jewelry that was shaped like food, like hyper realistic food. And I didn't buy anything at the time, and I kicked myself for months afterwards of like, I want a tiny cake pendant or like earrings, and now I can buy them, and I'm very excited. So I was gonna get a tiny cake or something, or earrings. So
yeah, it's really nice in a way having this so you can go back to it, because it can be overwhelming going into a craft fair some days, and you're just like, I know a lot of them I've just like, I ended up not even getting anything, or you know. So
yeah, it is kind of a nice, I mean, it's like the best case scenario that they can do this right now, but it also is a different nice way to browse. I've been enjoying on Instagram, just like, if you follow the Detroit Urban Craft Fair, then you get the people who are taking over every day. And it's just really like opened this whole new world of people to follow and crafters. And it's really kind of cool the way that they've set that up. So
yeah,
I've been enjoying that.
So that was our episode on rabbit holes and a little shout out to craft fairs. So maybe become a regular segment. I don't know.
Yeah,
we talked about it because it's very catchy. Recent rabbit holes. We talked about doing that as a regular thing that we've just mentioned the things we're researching. But yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us for this episode of Crafty Chat. We'll see you in 2 weeks for episode number 25. We're not quite sure what we're going to talk about yet, but we'll see when we get there.
Yep.
Oh, right. I'm sorry, I forgot. Our coworker Pat will be with us to talk about some projects that she's been working on and some embroidery stuff that she's done. Always one. There's always one every time. So again, thank you everybody for joining us. Until we see you next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and don't forget to love each other. Bye, everybody.